First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sketch from this photograph, and you can do this if you're not comfortable with your drawing skills. It's a little easier to use the photograph to make your sketch, and I'll do this sometimes just to save time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my layers palette over here, and I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to move this underneath my photograph. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this background of the new layer with white. And then I'm going to lower the opacity of my photograph. So now what I can do is create a new layer, and this will be the layer. Layer 2 is the layer that I'll do my sketch on top of. And I'll do that in probably a black. And I think the paintbrush that I'm going to use, I think 13 will be about right. And now all I'm going to do is with my pen, I'm just going to draw over the photograph. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a quick sketch because you're going to paint over this. So I'm not too worried about getting everything exact. But if you want it to be exact because that'll make things easier for you, then go ahead and do that. I mean, do whatever you're comfortable with. So you can see I'm just going through and creating all the lines, the cheekbone, the jaw, and any sort of, if I need extra help with the shading later while I'm painting, then what I'll do is I can draw an outline of that. For instance, here, if I want, I can outline that shadow shape. But I think that I'm just going to stick to the basics of the photograph for now. So I'm going to come up here and do the eye. And you can see I'm scribbling a little bit, and that's fine.
So right now we're just getting a basic full, just all the outlines of all the edges and things like that, all the areas that are not smooth.
Right. We're blocking in everything in basic outline. I mean, and you can see I'm not fussing with anything really, you know. And if I want to make her hair bigger, then I can indicate that now.
Okay. If
I want to make it more curly, if I want to make it straight. This is just kind of a guide for my painting. So I'm just going to lay in all the basic structure of the face. Where the bones are, right.
Okay.
The top of the lips, you know, okay. Where the hair hits the neck.
Okay, I see. It's almost like photo retouching because all these areas are usually the areas we don't touch in photo retouching. But when it comes to, you know, the details, actually drawing a portrait, it's very important to emphasize those areas.
Right.
Yeah.
And we really want to be able to tell with the sketch the direction of, for instance, the hair. We want to know that the hair is falling off of the side of her head. Even if we can't really see it so much in the photograph, we want to be able to know what's there in the sketch because we'll add more color and highlights to the hair when we paint it.
Well, this is pretty easy to do. I guess if anybody could just, I mean, you can just trace over the photo. So if your drawing skills aren't, you know, the greatest, you can, you know, if you're still learning how to draw, just trace the image, just like she's doing right here.
Right, exactly. So. And you just get the basic structure in. And if you need, you know, if you want to come in and lay out where the shadows of the face are, if that'll help you, you can do that. Okay. Just
kind of like for future reference.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
You can lay that out in, you know, kind of a geometric pattern, if that'll help you. But okay, so basically we have our sketch there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the photograph.
Okay.
And then you'll see we'll have the sketch.
And
okay.
Now you just fill it in and you just.
Now using the photograph that I can see on the other monitor, I'll start filling in with paint. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to begin to apply color to the image, and I'm going to create a new layer so that I have my sketch intact. If I make a mistake or if, you know, whatever happens, it'll always be there. I can revert back to that. And I'm going to start with a dark color, and you can see I'm going to start using the more muted colors down here towards the middle of the palette. And I don't want to use the bright colors in the beginning, so I'm going to start with these. And I'm just going to start by laying in my darker colors using my reference. And I'm going to go up here and use a larger brush because this is just too small. And I'm just going to begin, and this doesn't have to be neat, doesn't have to be perfect, because you can see that my sketch is still intact underneath.
I see. So these are just the shadows then,
These
right?
are just the shadows,
okay.
and they do not have to be exact. And my
okay.
opacity is turned down to about 37, 35.
So we're going to do the shadows first.
I'm going to do my, my darks first. So I'm just going to lay this in pretty quickly, and I'm not being fussy about it again. Just kind of laying everything in just so that I have the basic structure of the face. And I'm just going to lay in all the shadows that I see. There's some over here with the ear. Now the ear is mostly hidden with the hair, which you can see over here.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm going to lay in the shadows anyway, just because I want to do those little tendrils over the ear. I don't want to do, I don't want to fill it in with hair. I want to give it more depth by just adding those little tendrils. So I'm going to do an airbrush sort of effect just so I lay in it a little quicker. So I'm laying in all those shadows. And again, I'm not being fussy with it. I'm just laying it in as quickly as possible, so that I have it. Okay. And these are not just the shadows, but they are just kind of the darker values of the face. Okay, so now that those are laid in, what I could do is I could come in and do the hair right now, but I'm just going to focus on the face for the beginning of the tutorial. We can do the hair last.
Okay.
So what I like to do is I usually like to start with an ochre, and I'll start over here. Let's try this color here. It's kind of a mid value. It's on the lighter side, but I'm going to use a slightly larger brush. Let's try a 35. And let's begin to lay this in. That actually is on the lighter side, but that's okay. And I'll show you why that's okay in just a second. So I'm just getting it all laid in.
So right now we're just doing the basic foundation of the face?
Right.
Okay.
We're just getting color down, basically.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be the exact color.
Something to work with.
That you want. Something to work with. So that the way I generally work is I like to have layers of color still visible underneath each consecutive layer that I create. So the way I work is if I have more color down in the beginning, that's more beneficial to the end result.
I see. Because
it adds a little more depth. So I'm just filling this in, and then what I'm going to do is, once this is all done...
Now what type of color is this? Like
this is an ochre, a yellow ochre.
Okay.
And you can see my opacity is still down at 35. So if I really get in there and put the full color down, that's what it is. You know, it's a darker version of what we're doing. Okay.
Now, is that generally what you use for most skin tones? Is you start with an ochre, or is it just
generally when I'm doing a street painting, or when I'm doing any sort of painting on my own, I generally start with the mid-tone ochres to lay in the basics of the face after I do my darks. And you can see, once again, I'm not using the darkest dark.
I see.
I'm using a mid-tone dark. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a color in between these two to kind of lay in the middle ground. So I'm going to use that pink, and you can see that already it's starting to round out the forehead because we have the darker color over here and the lighter color over here. I think I'm going to lower the opacity just a little bit so that we keep those colors underneath. And I'm going to put this down anywhere the image is a little more red, where the blood is coming through the skin a little more. It's a little more visible always around the eyes and the nose and the ears. Okay. So I'm going to start to add those values in. And this preliminary sketch we did of the shadows, you can see how I'm kind of roughly staying within those lines.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I can see that. You can go back and, of course, you can erase those lines and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
later.
if I want to, I can come
Okay.
back to the the layer where the sketch is.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I can erase those if I'd like.
Do you keep the lines when you're done, or do you actually do your own artistic lines and then just get rid of the sketch completely?
Well, the sketch isn't going to be visible when I'm finished.
Okay, okay.
So that will just be underneath. You can delete it if you want, or, you know, you can just compress the file.
It's just kind of a reference. That's all it is.
It's just a reference,
Gotcha.
exactly. Oops,
Okay.
I still have the eraser on. Okay. So I'm just going to lay this all in. Now around the hair, you know, it's a little more shadowed.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to lay that in. The eyes, of course, have more red. And you can see already that these are starting to look more inset.
More dynamic. Yeah, it's starting to pop out a little bit. I can see because of the shadows and everything, yeah.
Okay. So now that we have, okay, all those basically laid in. Well, let's do a little on the ear over here, just so that it ties in with the face. And we want to make sure if in the image we have a face, a neck, an ear, a shoulder, we want to make sure that we're not just working on the face and leaving the shoulders and everything else untouched, because what'll happen is we'll work on the face and get this to look really good, but then once we start down here on the neck, the colors are not going to be consistent. Because if we have, you know, 200 colors over here, we're not going to remember the exact color that we chose to do the pink on this cheek. So we want to make sure.
Could you use the eyedropper tool for that? Or do you ever use the eyedropper tool?
Yeah, we could use the eyedropper tool, but we're also working with opacities.
Okay.
So these are a little thinner. So we want to just make sure that we're using the original color that we began with, and we're adding that in a little bit to every part of the image, just to keep it consistent. Okay. And let's get this done a little faster. We'll raise the opacity a little bit. Okay. And I just kind of want to give this an overall pinkish glow on her chest and neck. Okay, so I did a little bit larger airbrush. So now you can see everything's kind of blocked in with some sort of color. And once again, it's pretty scribbly. It's not perfect at all. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is
you just go back.
I'm just going to continue. I'm going to continue to layer. Okay, so now I'm going to continue painting my reds into the skin tones. And if it's easier, we will bring over this image so that you can see what I'm doing.
You could just leave it there as a reference if it doesn't. I guess you have to. Yeah.
So you can see why I'm putting in the pinks where I am.
Okay, so you don't really need a really large reference. So even if you have a very small photo, you can still just
right. I just kind of want to see where the basic colors lie. And again, I am not being fussy about it. I'm just kind of laying things in. But I think painting is a lot about placement. So you want to make sure that the placement of your color is generally on track, generally where it should be. So now, okay, there we go. So now we have our basic red undertones. And probably a little more than we need. But it's all there, and that'll come through in every consecutive layer that I make. Okay, so that's underneath. It's kind of like, I look at it like glazing in an oil painting. Because when you glaze, you have the colors that you put down first, and those are still visible, and they interact with the colors that you put on top. And because we're using, you know, transparent colors, it's creating an infinite number of colors. It's not just creating the pink we have here. It's creating all these lighter values and in-betweens. So that's what we want.
It's all blending together.
It's all blending together,
okay,
exactly.
Yeah.
So now what I can do is, once I have all these laid in, I can come over here and I can choose a lighter color for my highlighted areas. And I can begin to put those in. And that's probably a little bit too pink. So we'll choose something like a lighter ochre.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll raise the opacity of that.
Oh yeah, I see how that blends in really nicely.
So 61, let's do it at 43 or 45. Okay, now we'll just start to put in those lights. So you can still see everything underneath.
Mm-hmm.
But we're starting to get the structure of the face.
Oh yeah, I see that now. Now, do you do the eyes and the hair last, or?
Well, I don't like to put too many of my darks or my lights in too soon.
Mm-hmm.
I like to kind of get the middle values in first.
Okay.
Lay those out. And it lets me fuss with things a little more, just kind of get them close to the values that I want in the underpainting before I do any of the actual permanent final painting. So you can see I'm starting to clean it up a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's a huge difference. Yeah.
Okay.
I can see it's all blended together.
And in some areas, like here, I went a little too far with the light, but I can come back with my next color and adjust that. So now I think what I'm going to choose a more orange color, a little more saturated, and we're going to try this out. And we're going to do these areas around the nose and the eye that are a little brighter. So we're going to take the opacity down just in case this is too bright. And we're going to start out soft. Now that's a little too orange, I think. So I'm going to go a little more red. Let's give this a try.
And it's okay to undo.
It's okay to undo,
okay,
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you feel more comfortable with this, what you can do is just, now that you have this underpainting, if you're happy with that, let's just create a new layer and we'll paint the next series of colors on that.
Just kind of to be safe.
To be
so you
safe,
don't have
exactly.
everything on
if you want to go back, revert to that, to the other layer, you can do that. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger to 65. And now I can get these larger areas. And you can see I'm going a little dark, but that's okay because the color is going to come through, you know, when I put the lighter layer on top. Okay, so we'll just lay those in basically like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a cool color. And I'm going to choose something like, let's
more like
find
a blue.
Well, I'm going to go with a pale green.
Okay.
And let's see what we have. Let's try this. And basically, I want to move to a slightly smaller brush. Let's go back to our 27. And I want to lay in the cool colors. If you look at this image here, you can see that in these areas here, where the face turns to the shadow side, it becomes a little cooler. So we want to lay in those cools.
Okay. So you really get like everything. You try to get it as close. You really look closely at the photo and try to get mostly everything.
If we just use these warm colors that we have up here, the form isn't going to turn.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that we add in these cool colors so that we get that range of depth.
Gotcha. More that photorealistic look.
Right.
Kind of, like, yeah, okay.
So, again, not too fussy, but I'm laying it in where I think it should be. You know, around the eyes, definitely. The bottom of the nose, we want to lay that in under the chin, and then on this other side of the face where the you know, the form turns to the shadow side. Okay, and then we can go down and do that to the neck and add all those in, all those little shadow areas that need to be cooled down because they're too warm. And now that we have this, I think what I'll do is I'll come in and I will start adding a little bit of the smaller elements. So I'm going to put in that nostril so that I can get the form around that. I'll put in the lips and I'll start to block in the eyes. So we're still just blocking in.
I see.
Okay, so you can see we just have, basically it's all just, you know, blurring together. And that's fine for now. Once we start to put in the details, then everything will be a little more refined. So I'm going to choose a deeper red and a smaller brush. Let's go with the 21 for now. And then I'm just going to start to add in these little details that we need. We'll raise the opacity so we can do this a little quicker. And you can see in the image, her lips really pop. They're really red. But we don't want to put that red down first. We want to put down a base.
Okay.
We want to put in the shadows of her lips first.
So don't just jump to the red.
Don't jump to the red.
Always
right,
start.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just start to lay in once again the original sketch. She has her lashes. We don't want to be too definite on everything, but we just want to kind of get it in there for sure so we don't lose it under our more opaque layers. So I'll put in the line of her nose. And you can do this with the mouse if you'd like. It just takes a little bit of practice. But,
yeah, because that's what I'm used to. I'm used to more like the mouse. And
right, and most people are. And if you just practice the drawing with the mouse, I mean, eventually you'll get used to it.
I guess the great thing about the tablet is that it's pressure sensitive.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so if
that's
I
a big plus.
Okay, so back to just kind of the definition of everything. And once again, I'm not being too exact. Okay, so now what I can do is lay in the eyes really quickly, and I never want to use a white for the white of the eye.
Okay.
Always use a gray.
Okay.
Just with the lips, we're not going to use that bright red. We're going to start with a darker color. So I'll start with kind of this middle
so gray for the eyes.
Blue-gray.
Okay.
Exactly. You know, our white highlight goes last because we want that really to stand out for the rest of the eye. And we'll just lay that in. And it's really important to notice that once we really start getting into these eyes, the white of the eye has red in it also. So everything in the face should have some sort of red, warm hue to it. You know, it's not just the blue-gray color with the white highlight. It turns
like on
from
on
cool
the right there.
to warm. Exactly. The light is on this side of her face. So we have that warmth over here, and we turn to the cool. Okay, so we're going to remember that once we start painting in the image. Okay, so let's move that to the other screen for now. Okay, so let's see what we have. Okay, so that's what we have right now. You can see the darkest dark is her lips. We're going to adjust that. We're going to start lightening these up just a bit. Let's see, we'll come up here to, let's go with pink for now. And just lay in these lighter colors just to give it a value. Just so it's a little softer.
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay, but I'm not going to keep it pink. I don't normally use a lot of pink on the lips. I like to keep it with the kind of the burgundies, the reds, and the oranges. Okay, the pink gives it a little more of a Barbie effect, which we don't want. So we're just using that in the beginning stages to lay it in. Okay? Okay, so now that we have our underpainting finished, we're going to start with the final painting. And so all the strokes that we do from now on will be completely visible for the most part. So I'm going to start with a larger brush, and I'm going to just start to block in everything. Let's see, that's a little bit small. I'm just going to make sure that I have everything laid in properly. So I'm just going to soften all the hard edges of the underpainting. And again, I chose that ochre. So you can see this ochre is now blending in all these colors softly. You can still see all of them, but it's just kind of softening their transitions into the other colors. Okay, so now again, I go down here to the neck because we don't want to abandon that. We want to keep it within the same color palette as the face. Okay, now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose a kind of a peachy orange color. And I'm going to bring those cheekbones back into the image. I lost them a little bit earlier, so I want to bring those back.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Okay, now everything's still very soft, and that's fine for now. So you don't have to worry if you mess up with anything, because you have everything on these layers. So if I need to, I can get rid of what I've done over the last 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Okay, but layer 4 looks like that. So this is how transparent I'm making each consecutive layer. It's very thin so that I keep all the layers that I've put underneath, all those colors are still coming through. So it just adds more depth, okay? So we started there, underpainting. Now we're working on the complete. And once I've done enough of this transition color, I'll start with my final, very detailed kind of rendering of the eyes and the ears and the lips.
So is the skin going to really be this smooth, or do we sort of make like a texture or something, or
well,
how does that work? Do we ever add any noise or anything, or?
Well, you can do that if you want. I am just adding texture, or I will add texture as I add the brush strokes. Because I don't want to. I'm more concerned right now with getting the transition from shape to shape. So the nose into the cheek. If you want to add texture, you can use a different brush. You can use one of the pastel brushes or something like that. But right now I'm basically just showing you how to apply the colors so that they work together and create the depth that you want.
Okay.
I'm going to choose something for this shadow area over here, because this is a little light right now. So let's see. And if you want, you can even come over here with the picker and just kind of see what value range you're in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of in this dark burgundy brown. So if I want, I can keep that color. So we'll pull that in. And you can see, because it's transparent, it's not giving us that same red color. It's going on very thin and mixing with the colors that are underneath. So it's almost a little gray. It's a little grayed out, which is fine. Just kind of want to put those edges back in. Okay. So now that we have that, I think what I'm going to start doing is zooming into certain areas.
Okay.
So that I can complete them fully. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll start focusing on the eyes. So now what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to focus on an eye and work out from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my dark again. And I'm just going to make sure that this is defined enough and correctly. And the opacity's down, so we're going to raise that. We're going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so now we're just going to make sure that everything is defined the way it should be. Once again. So we have the lash line here. And the bottom lash line.
Now those fine lines are what is really going to make it stand out. There are just very little lines of shadows, fine shadow lines, basically.
Right, and this also, you know, by not making everything smooth and by leaving these lines, it's just going to give it a little more texture.
I see.
Okay, so now that that's defined a little more, I'm going to take a lighter color and I'm going to come in and give that lid a little bit of depth. Now, it's not going to look great yet. We're going to do that, the top ridge of that lower lid. You know, and if you got lines, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to give, let's see, the outer eye just a little bit of that warm ochre. And then a little bit of that warm peach. Because it's turning towards the light. And it'll give the eyeball that spherical feeling, and that's what we want. So I'm just going to keep adding texture to the eyeball before we put on our highlight. And you'll see this will all make sense in a second. I know it's a little kind of strange. But so I put kind of an orangey peach over here, kind of a green color over here, and now I'm adding kind of a mid-tone, I guess it's almost a lavender or periwinkle.
Now that's just to create more like a round sphere.
Exactly.
Or
yeah, we just want it to be a little
rounded,
just to give it that rounded feeling. We want to make sure it has that before we start doing all the details, or it's not going to have that three-dimensionality. Okay, so now, just for kind of a quick look at what it's going to be with the highlight, we can add a little of that down here. Let's go up here. Now that's not a white yet. Where's our white? Let's try this one here. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a larger brush. Let's try a 35. And then I'm just going to lightly, let's lower this, lower the opacity. And I'm going to lightly build up right at the closest part of the sphere to us, which is this section right here because it catches the highlight. And you can see by adding this transparent white, it just brings this part of the eyeball forward.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
It's a nice blend there.
So now what we can do is we can work on the iris here. So we'll lower the brush size back to, I guess, our 21. We'll try that. And I'll start by doing the darkest part of the eye. And I think instead of using a black, I'll use a very dark blue.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to redraw that iris. And again, this is a little light, so we'll raise that a little. And we'll lower our brush size to 17. Okay, so we get that outer edge.
Now, when you're drawing circular shapes, you just do it all by hand. You don't use a selection tool or anything like that.
I'm going to do it all by hand because we can go back and we can adjust the outer edge because we know, we used a pale green on the edge. Mm-hmm. We used the peach over here. So I can adjust it as I go. And I probably should because right now this dark is a little harsh against this light green.
Yeah.
So if I want to go back and just over the center of where these two colors meet, mm-hmm. do that light green transparently, it'll just have the iris flow better into the white of the eye. So we'll do that. Okay, so we're just redefining this. And we're doing the outer edge of the iris. Now we'll define the center portion. And the important part about doing the eye is that you make sure you have all your highlights in the right places. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose, because she has blue eyes, I'm going to choose a lighter blue. Let's go with, this is the dark blue we used, I believe, so we'll just stay within that hue of colors along that gradient. And we'll put in, and what I like to do is, if you look at an eye, it has those little radial lines.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I like to draw it in. Now, if you want to just do, one brush stroke across the whole thing, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I think if you do it this way, it gives it a little more of the depth that we're looking for.
So again, you're not starting with black. You're actually starting with like the darkest blue.
Right.
And then brightening from there. Or
right. I want to use my lightest whites and my blackest blacks last.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. And again, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. You're building up.
It's part of the art.
To these. Exactly.
Just to have it more like the look hand drawn.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So now if I want to, because this is very gray, I can come up here and I can choose a brighter color if I want to, and very lightly add in a little of that. Because we already have the base of our grays, if we add a little more color, it won't be too abrupt. It won't be too harsh. Okay, so we can add that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here to one of the dark blues, and in a very transparent brush, I'm just gonna softly glaze over the edge so that it sits back a little farther while still having those that texture of color underneath. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it again, nice, yeah. it rounds it out a little. Okay, and then I'll just go back up, let's see, to my dark color that we made, and I'll just redefine the top of that eye. And again, if you want to, you can do all these details on another layer so that you don't lose anything if you make a mistake. Okay. There we go. And now I'm going to choose a dark gray, and I'm going to do the same thing along here to give a shadow from the eyelid.
Just for the separation?
Just for the separation, because I did the dark of the eyelid itself, mm-hmm. but now I need a shadow from that lid. And I'm just going to kind of do a little squiggle at this transition where the iris meets the white of the eye. And that softens it just a little so it's not too abrupt. Okay, now what I can do is, now this isn't finished, but I'm gonna work around the eye consistently so I don't bring one portion up too much. So I'm gonna pick a peach color here and I'm gonna do this underside, let's see, of the lid, that highlight. And then I'm going to put a soft highlight at the very top of the lash line.
Is the lashes sort of like a final touch?
Yeah, we'll do the lashes last. We want to, because that's over everything else. If we do those first, we're going to have to go around them with all these highlights and, and shadows and things like that. So I just kind of want to bring in all the colors that I see here. And again, I'm not being exact or too fussy with anything.
Oh, it's beautiful. It just really stands out. Just that eyelid part is just, it's really nice.
And we'll start adding the darks under the eye. There'll be a little more color here. And this is where the texture comes in. This is where the texture comes in because I'm not going to do the soft airbrush anymore. I'm just going to leave it so that it looks like a digital painting. And if you want to soften it out, you can do that. But I kind of like the texture of the brush strokes to show a little bit.
I like that too. It just has that little artsy thing to it.
Yeah, it's a little more, you know, you want somebody
almost
to...
looks like a pencil drawing.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Like a little color pencil or maybe pastel. Okay, so there's the basics of your eyeball. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take that same dark that we started out on this eye with by defining it, and we're going to define the second eye. So I'm just going to come in there with that dark, redefine the shape. Just like so. And now that we have this eye done, what we can do is, if necessary, if it'll make it a little easier, sometimes it does, is we can use the color picker, because on this eye we were using more opaque colors. So if need be, I can come over here and make sure that these colors are exactly the same. And it looks like they are. Maybe even a little lighter. Okay. So we'll just redefine that, like so. And then we'll just go through the same steps that we did on the first eye. So we'll make sure that nose is drawn in there. We get a little shadow from that. Make sure that's defined. It's okay if that shadow's on the eye, because remember, this eye over here is turning the corner, so it's going to be more in shadow than this eye. Okay, so now we'll start with the white of the eye. And I believe we took one of these grays over here. Actually, let's go with the darker one. And we'll color that in. And we'll take a warm color. Now,
why are you going with the gray again instead of the white?
Because I want this eyeball to look spherical. Okay. If I just lay down a white, there's no place for my highlight to go because the highlight is already reached with the white. I see. In order to make this highlight pop, you need to create what's around it in a darker value to make this white stand out. If I darken this area a little more, if I darken the value, this white would pop a lot more. Right now, to me, this looks like a cream. So we're going to see if this can't be a little higher.
Okay.
As a highlight. If not, then I think I'll darken this area a little more so it looks like that eyeball is wet. Okay, so I've added this gray over here. I think I'm going to add a little more blue to it. Just a touch. There we go. And Just in case, I'll add a little more over here, just so that they match, just in case that color was a little off. We'll lower the opacity again just a little. See, so we can darken that, and already that highlight's lighter.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And don't worry about that. We'll go back and we'll adjust that eye as a whole. So then we'll take this peach color that we used, and I think it was something like one of these over here, but I'm going to use the color picker because I put it on pretty opaque. And now we'll just put that in the center there. Okay, now you see how it still has that darker value underneath, which is what we want. We want that layered effect of color. Okay, we don't just want one color put down and then that's it. We want to layer them. Okay, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to choose, let's see, how about one of these yellows? And I'm going to lower the opacity, and I'm just going to meet these two colors and values in the middle. So I'm going to give it a little yellow to meet the green to the peach. Okay, now all I'm going to do is put that white highlight back in. We have a small brush. And what we can do is just put that in the highest, or I'm sorry, the closest point of the eye to us. So now you see that the eye has a roundness to it. This area does. It goes from the warm to the light to the cool. So it turns the corner. That's what we want.
Nice.
Okay, now we'll do this iris here. So we'll take this same gray blue that we used before. And we'll raise the opacity. And notice I've never gone to 100% on my opacity. I've pretty much stayed below 70 for the most part. So we'll color this eyeball in.
Do you like the work with the crosshair or the actual size of the brush?
I prefer to use the size of the brush.
Kind of like that?
Yes,
okay.
I prefer that. And how did you do that?
You can switch back and forth between the crosshair and the actual size of the brush by pressing the caps lock key on the keyboard. I know and a lot of times I prefer to see the size of the brush like you're seeing now, but for maybe some of those smaller areas, I don't really know. Some people might prefer the crosshair, a little plus symbol, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this way you can really see what you're working with, pretty much.
Right. Yeah, I prefer to see where the brush is going to land, what the diameter of the brush is, so that I know how much it's going to cover.
Yeah, it's coming along really nice. Just everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can we look at the photo one more time? That is just unbelievable. Just how everything, by using the visual representation, you have, everything's there already for you. There's not too much guesswork. There's a little color theory, but just by having the representation in front of you, I think if somebody just really, with a little bit of practice, they could do this. I think anybody could do this,
Well, and my image right now is fairly stylized compared to the photograph. There's film grain in here, and it's just a little more textured. But what we're accomplishing here are the basics of laying in the image and getting it to look like it has some sort of depth. It's not just a flat face. It turns the corner, it has the curves, it has the spherical eyeballs. It has a roundness to it. So that's what we're looking for. So now we're going to complete the iris with our light gray colors here. And what brush do we have? Is this the one I used last time? Let's go with the 5. There we go, and we'll just come around. Now it looks a little deformed now, but we can fix that. Okay, and then we'll use our more intense turquoise color. And we'll drag that around in certain places. You never want to use just one color on something. Okay, so that's why even if it looks complete, I want to add another color. I want to add something to add to the depth of whatever it is I'm painting. So I want to make sure I continue to add layers of color upon layers of color. Okay. Now what I can do is, I think I'm going to add a darker color. Let's try this. I think that's a black or almost a black. And we'll go in with a slightly larger brush. We'll turn our opacity down just a bit, just in case it's too dark. And we'll add that dark in the center of the eye. Let's see here.
So this is just a dark blue then? Or is this actually black?
Well, I'm using the swatches here, so I can't exactly tell.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're so small what color it is exactly, but to me this looks close enough to a black so that I can use it for this purpose. And I'm just gonna, you know, shadow some of this a little bit more. I think I might have done that a little too much, but we can adjust that later. Okay, now over here it looks a little more green. And that is because this color here is darker than this color. So because this is brighter, this center portion is going to look darker. Because this is not as dark, this is going to look lighter. So it's all relative. Okay? One color next to another color, they affect each other. Okay? So whatever you put next to this black is going to affect it. It's going to make it look different. So if I put a white over here, this is going to look black. Okay, but we don't want that. This is the eye that's turning the corner. It's on the other side of the face. So we could even gradate this a little bit darker, and I think that's what we'll do with a very transparent color. And you can see it barely did anything. Okay.
I could just tell just a little bit. Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah, just a tiny bit. You just want to add a little bit.
Oh yeah, looks nice.
Okay, so now that that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add these reds to the eyelid. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to choose this color, which is the one that we created originally, this dark, and I'm going to color that in. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's raise our opacity. I always forget to do that. Okay, so let's color that in. And let's do around the eye a little bit, since it's in shadow. You can see we're starting to cover up that sketch underneath, which is good. We want that. We want this to become more opaque the more layers we add. Okay, now I'm going to come up and add this more intense. I think it's almost a pink, and we'll put that in there. And it looks a little darker, and that's fine. Okay. And I think I'll make this brow a little bit larger, just so it doesn't look like it's cutting in too much. We'll pull that down there. We'll add the pink over here. Okay, now I'll come over here and I'll pick this orange. And we'll add all of these same colors. Maybe even, you know what, I think I'm going to make it a little bit darker. So I added a little more value to it, just because it's on that shadow side. There we go. We'll add that in there. That might be a little bit too opaque, so we'll lower this. There we go. And then I think what we'll do is we'll round out this cheek a little more along with the brow. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to choose one of the ochres again. Let's see. This one has a little bit of green in it. Not sure I want that. Let's go with... Let's try this one over here and see how that works. Actually, I think that's a little too yellow. So I'm going to lower the intensity a little bit darker, and we'll try that. And again, kind of transparent. We're only at 18, and I think I'll make the brush a little bit bigger just so we get a sweep of gentle color over the top. We don't want too much. So if we make the brush a little bigger, it'll be more of a transition over what's already there.
We're just doing this with just the standard circular brushes in Photoshop.
Right.
I mean, it's nothing special. We're not using calligraphy or any type of special shaped brush.
No.
We're just doing this with the regular rounded brush, and you can, it's just a soft, circular soft brush. That's all it is.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And of course, if you wanted to do this with a little more texture, you could use one of the textured brushes, which would work great. But now, because I added this yellow, which is a little intense, but that's fine, we're going to add a little of it elsewhere, just so that we get that consistency.
Balance, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go over here to my image on the other screen and make sure I'm viewing everything that I need to add this yellow to. Okay, let's zoom out a little and see what we have. Okay, so now what we're going to do, now that we have that yellow base over our layers of color, we're going to go in with the final colors on this eyelid. Let's do that first. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose one of these peachy pink colors. Okay, let's try this one. This is pretty light, but let's see what we get. I'm going to lower my brush size. And we just want to define this area. And you notice I'm keeping it transparent, so I keep the texture and the colors that are underneath coming through. Now, anything I do on this side of the eyebrow, I want to continue on this side of the eyebrow. Oh. If I do not, it's not going to have that continuity. It's going to look disjointed. So I want to make sure I use that same color on top. Okay, so I'm going to use the picker, and I'm going to pick that exact color, and I'm going to add a little of it up here. Now, I don't have to go all the way up, but I just want to make sure that both sides of this eyebrow work together. Now, you can see right now there's a little lump here on this brow. I'm going to start adjusting that when I do the hair, so we don't have to worry about that just yet. But if it bothers you, we can erase it. And we'll lower the brush, because actually it's kind of bothering me. So we can just come through and soften that a little bit. And then that's a little better. Now, of course, we still have our sketch underneath, but that's better already. Okay, so now we'll continue with these peach colors. And I think already that's starting to work much better. Now that I have that finished almost, I want to come in, and because this is mostly warm colors, I want to bring in a cool color. Now, we talked about this in the beginning, but as you can see, her eye under here is pretty warm except for this portion here around the eyebrow and where it comes into this little nook of her nose. Yes, it gets cooler. So we're gonna come over to our color swatches, and we're going to choose a nice olive green. And I think this one is a close value to what we already were using. So very lightly, I'm going to lower this a little just in case it's too dark. And I'm going to start to pull in that green. Now I can add a little over here because it's turning the corner. And then also a little down here. Okay, that looks pretty good so far to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this green down the edge of the nose, because what the green is going to do when I start painting in this portion of the nose here, I need these warm colors to come up the side of the nose, over, and then down behind the edge of the nose. I need it to come over to the plane where the eye is resting. So if I add the green, the cool color, to the very edge, and it's not too light, it's to be a medium value, then the nose will turn that corner.
Interesting.
Okay, if I use a very light color along this edge, it's going to lose the effect. It's going to flatten everything out. So I want to choose that mid green and use that there on the nose. Okay, now this will make sense once I start painting that in. But I'm just kind of moving around in this area so that this area doesn't get very rendered and then everything else is flat. I want to kind of work everything up at the same time. Okay? So let's see what we have now. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. I'm going to work my way up the forehead just a little bit, and then we're going to address this yellow. You can see that the yellow that was under this brow portion is still there, but it's disguised by the neutral skin tones that I put over it. Okay, you can still see all the oranges and the reds, the lavender and the green. Okay, it's just more subdued because all the layers are transparent. Okay, let's see, let's go back and choose our peach. Which one was that? I think it was this one up here. We'll raise our opacity and our brush size to 27 again. Okay, let's use that green again, actually. And let's do that same thing we did to the nose to the forehead.
I like it. I think it makes a big difference. I like that.
Well, it definitely, you need that cool, I mean, there's a lot of green in our skin.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't add that into your image, it's going to flatten out.
Right.
So I'm just even going to go into the hairline. You know, once again, it doesn't have to be perfect because it's just the basic. I'm going to lower the opacity. I'm going to put a hint of it right there so the two sides match. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to choose this skin color here, and I'm going to go over that green to hide that intensity, to soften it.
It's interesting because, you know, when you know, for somebody that really doesn't know how or has never painted before, you would never think green would be part of the skin tone.
Right.
You know, or yellow or, you know, red or whatever. But when it all just comes together, I think that it's there. They don't actually see those colors.
Right.
They just see the skin, the orangey kind of skin color. But when so
it's really important that you really look at the skin tones to get those colors that you wouldn't normally see. You know, there are a lot of greens, a lot of blues, especially around the eyes because the skin is thinner. Mm-hmm. You know, around the nose, when something turns the corner, it becomes cooler. You know, you just have, there are a lot more colors in there than just what you would find in a portrait set. They give you a lot of peaches and creams and ochres, but you need these cool colors and these, you know, just, you need something to create the depth. If it's all warm, you're not going to have that same effect.
So if your image is losing depth, there's a good chance it's because of the colors. You're not adding enough
Right,
colors.
exactly. And most of the time, if I'm having trouble with something, you know, a face or some element of you know, a figure, it's usually because I'm not adding enough of the cool colors.
Right.
You know, and as soon as I put that color down, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's what it was.
Yeah, that just makes sense. Yeah. And now you're just working your way into the hair. This is the shadow.
This is the shadow, right. Now, another thing to remember is you can never put the highest highlight at the edge of an image. We were talking earlier about the nose. You don't want that highest highlight at the edge of the nose because it flattens it out. It's the same thing over here on the edge. If you want this forehead and brow to turn the corner, you need to have a darker color than what's next to it. You want your highlight just before that dark, just before it turns the corner. So along the edge, it should always be darker than what's inside of that shape. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you would do this all on the same layer, basically. You can always go back and fix things and
right.
You know,
if you feel more comfortable, you know, again, if you feel more comfortable doing this on several different layers because you don't want to mess up the layers that you've already done, that's fine. Let's see, I'm choosing kind of a mid warm color. I don't want it too dark, but I don't want it too light. Okay, that's pretty good. That's decent. Okay. Now I'll choose my skin tone to go over that. And we don't want something too light. Let's try this. That's pretty good. Okay, we'll lower that opacity so that we get that transparency coming through. Okay, now we're just going to work our way around into the nose. And instead of doing the airbrush effect, I'm going to start to just draw that in quickly, just to give it a little more texture. So we're going to complete this nose here by adding a little of this orange color. We want to pull that in and really finish this off as much as possible. Get it as close to done as we can. We're going to come over here. We're going to add the reds to that nose, which is really important that we get a nice deep red. Like I mentioned earlier, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, that's where we have the most intense colors. Now this is still a little bit too dark. But it's starting to have that nice intensity, but we need a more orange red. So now it's going to look a little messy and a little weird right now, but we'll get there. We'll get where we want to be. Okay, so you see I'm adding these intense reds. And actually, since I'm here, I'm going to go down to the lips, because I think this is a good color, and I'm going to add it. I'm going to add it to them too. She has some nice red lipstick on. And again, if you want to change the lip color, that's fine. Okay, so now these two are tied together. You know, they work together with those colors. I'm going to add a little to the eyes even, just in that transition from the dark to the light. Okay, so now everything has that color in it, which is good. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my skin tone. Let's see here. What do we want? Let's try something like this. Okay, and we're going to fix the shape of that nostril. And we want to pull this skin tone right inside because we don't want this to become a solid dark because that's just not how her nose is. Let's pull this image up here. And you can see that she has these darks here on the sides, but that skin flows right up there.
Oh,
and we want to keep that. If we make this a solid black, it's just not going to look right.
Yeah.
So we want to keep a little bit of softness in there. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to make sure and soften all these edges. And I'm going to come over here and choose kind of a greeny brown. We're going to try this one. It's kind of along the lines of that olive color. And I'm just going to meet this dark shadow with this light with kind of this medium green. Okay, we're just going to add a little more. So you can see as we go, right, we're adjusting the colors that we've already put down. You know, the green I used before was fine, but I think we should make it a little bit darker. And again, it's not perfect. I'm just kind of drawing it in there loosely, and that's okay. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in my light just so that I have some sort of landmark to work with. If I lay that in now, then I'll know what I have to work around. So usually we reserve the highlight for the end, but this is just going to give me a little bit of a shape to work with. This is where the nose, the structure of the nose bends. Okay, so we're going to keep those highlights in place, and you can see that's going to go right into the floose of the lip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now these are a little hard right now, but we're going to soften them. I'm going to take a soft peach, almost a yellowy color, and I'm going to work around that. And again, working the transparency. See how that's softening up?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want. Okay, and you can see we're getting the texture now.
Oh, yeah.
A little more of the texture. Now, I think what I'm going to do is this red is a little bit harsh. So I'm going to choose a soft, let's see, something with a little bit of pink in it, but not too much. So I think I'm going to go down here to my neutrals and choose maybe something like this. And I'm going to put it on a very low opacity and just lightly dust over that. So it just softens it a little bit, but it's still there. Okay, so now you see the edge of this nostril, which is curving under and up into the nose, is darker than this highlight here. We want the edge to be darker because it's curving under and around. Okay, if we put the highlight right at the edge, it's going to flatten that out. Okay, let's see here. Let's choose another peach and we'll start adding to the nose here. Let's raise that opacity that we took down to do the highlight adjustment. And we'll start pulling that in. And now it's softening that green. It's meeting the two colors. Okay, we're adding our texture as we go. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. It's okay if it isn't.
How long does it take to get used to the tablet compared to the mouse? If somebody's used to using the mouse for a while, they've been using it for many years, and then they go to the tablet, is it just...
Well, it's very much like using a pen. Mm-hmm. But the difference is I have a little button on this Wacom pen mm-hmm. that I'm pressing if I want. Here, let me show you over here. This is me pressing on the tablet itself. Okay, if I want just something like this airbrush effect, all I'm doing is holding down the button. I'm not even touching the tablet. I'm just kind of waving over the tablet. So all this softness, I've kind of avoided touching the tablet just so that I have that soft airbrush effect.
Right.
So it's very much like just using a pencil or a pen. You just have to get used to not looking down at what you're doing, mm-hmm. but looking up at the screen and kind of finding that connection between the two. But you know, using the pen gives you much more freedom. I think it's much more difficult with the mouse. It's definitely doable, but I think once you get used to the pen, you'll find that it's a lot easier and you'll enjoy it a lot more. And I'm going to soften the transition from these red lips to the floose of the lips here. So I'm adding these in, just fixing these transitions, which we need to do. You know, whenever you have this, especially in a human figure, whenever you have a dark, it cannot meet a light. You know, we're going to come in and we're going to add the highlight on this upper lip here. And if we don't have this pink to transition, it's going to look really weird. It's going to be too abrupt. So we need these soft transitions between values. So I'm just adding as I go, little by little transitions of color. You can see I put down that light first. I had the peach there already, but now I'm using this kind of a pale lemon yellow, and it's in between the light and this mid-tone. And I'm doing it very softly, hardly touching it, you know, but it's creating a transition. I'm coming over here to my other monitor and adjusting my image. Okay, and now I'm just going to continue up the cheek. And really, I mean, if you want to move around this whole image, that's fine. I've kind of avoided the neck for now just to get you acquainted with the face. But, I mean, if you feel comfortable heading on down there and adding all these colors, you can do that. And normally I would, but right now I just want to get you started on this face and kind of get it close, very close to a really nice finish.
So that's really going to make the cheek a little more dynamic, really pop out there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And you can see I'm barely pressing, but it's mixing with that peach that was already there. Okay.
And this is considered a texture, right? With the squiggly lines, the back and forth is almost like a texture.
Right, this is a texture, definitely. And I'm going back to my image on the other monitor, and you can see that over here, and I'm adjusting the view so that whatever I'm working on is what I'm looking at on the reference. So I'm going to come up here to her eye, and I'm going to add this nice lemon yellow. And adjust everything there, and we're going to have to add in her brow, give it that highlight. So slowly but surely it's coming along. And I mean, really, I could spend hours and hours and hours on this.
Oh, sure.
You know, and I could work on it till it's really photorealistic if I wanted to. But, you know, this, just with the basics, you could take this much farther. So it's really up to you how you want it to look. If you want it to be stylized and have the texture of the brush, then you can do something along these lines. But if you want it to have that realistic effect, then you can just keep going. Save this image, add another layer, and keep going from there. Okay, now I have all these squiggly lines. I think that is a good start, but I'm just going to soften it a little with the airbrush effect. So I'm going to raise the size of the brush to the 27, and I'm going to lower the opacity, and using the same color, I'm just going to soften just slightly. And you can barely tell that it's softening, but it is. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, this is a tiny, tiny bit, and then switch to this peach color. And I'm going to do the same thing. And now I think I'm going to grab a darker color and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just softly blending in these highlights with what I already have down. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to bring in some of these nice intense reds that you see under the lid here, and these cool neutrals. And then we'll finish up this eye. We'll lower the brush size a little bit to that 13, and we'll keep the opacity at 14 for now and see how that works out. Okay, so we'll just scribble over that orange that we'd already had. And that works fine. I'm going to scrub right into the bottom of that eye socket. And I'm going to scrub a little bit up here. And just adding that little bit of what looks like a lavender from that red mixing with the colors underneath just adds a lot more depth to that eye. And a little more over here so that it really creases. And then over here in the corner. Now I'm going to raise the opacity a little bit more. I'm going right into that eyeball. See, it kind of indicates the veins of the eye, but it doesn't really spell it out for you. And that's what we want. We want indication over, you know, highly rendered at this point. We can do the highly rendered after we get the basics down. Once again, lightly, lightly pressing. Okay, let's back up and see how that looks. And what I'm going to do is, because the lashes are a little risky, I'm going to add a new layer. So that if we make them too thick, or too clumpy, or too dark, too anything, I don't mess up the eye that's underneath. That's going to remain exactly the way it is. I'm going to do the lashes on a new layer. I'm going to choose this brown right here. I don't want to go black just yet. So I'm going to go down to, let's try the 9. And let's see what we have here. Let's see if we can do some of these lashes. And again, I'm not really worried too much about getting them right on target. I'm just lightly kind of basing them in. And you can see this side of the eye, they're coming out. And down here, they're coming down over the eyeball itself. And these are really soft, and that's fine. If you want to sharpen them up and give her lots of mascara, you are welcome to do that. But I'm going to keep these really soft because I really want the eye itself to stand out, not the lashes. So I'm just adding, really it's just a little bit of texture down here. Just a few little scribbles in the right direction. Okay, you notice these are out in this direction, more towards the center, and then out towards the edges. If you want, we can, you know, add a few little guys down here. Now, if really I want to make it a little more intense, let's see, we'll go up here and we'll choose a black. And very lightly, we're only on 33%. we'll do just the bases. And that'll give it just a little more. We want to keep those edges light. So you can see that just adds a little bit more to the lashes without doing much. So there's one eye. And we'll do a little bit over here just with the black because it's darker side. And you can see these are hardly showing up. But we're going to put them in anyway, just in case. We'll put a little down here. And it just adds a little something that we need. Okay. I'm going to take this same black and go down here and see if maybe I need to add a little bit to the edge of this nose, just the underside there, just to give it a little bit more depth and give it a little bit of that crispness. And really, you don't need a lot. You want it really light, a light touch. I'm going to come down here to the lips. I'm going to add a little bit, just a little bit, where the shadow should be. Okay, now I'm going to pay a little attention to these lips here. But first, I see this needs its highest highlight, so I'm going to do that really quick. I'm going to add, let's see, white here to my brush. And this is the first true white that we've used, I believe. I'm just going to do a scribble here on the nose. And that, I mean, that just instantly brings it out a little more.
Yeah, I can see a big difference there.
And I'm going to go up to that eye and make sure that that white is the white that I wanted. I'm going to put this up to 100. Just for this, I'm going to take the brush size down to the 5, and I'm going to add those little bits that we need just here and there. Just the tiniest little highlights. If we add too much, it's going to look like she's crying, and we don't want that.
And we want to stick with, I mean, exactly like the actual real photo is. We don't want to add, or would you be creative and add your own stuff, or should you always really go by what the photo looks like? No,
I mean, if you want to be creative, that's entirely up to you. I'm just showing you how to get your, if you want the face to look fairly realistic, this is how you do it. Once you have that, then, if you want to change her eye color, if you want to change her hair color, if you want to turn her into an alien, you can do that. But all these same basic principles apply. The nose is still going to have that cooler color on the edge to turn the corner. The eyeball is still going to be spherical. So all these same rules will apply. So it's good to learn them now, and then you can experiment with them later.
Whatever you're confident with.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lower the opacity of the white just a little. I'm going to raise the brush size, and I'm going to add a little more of a highlight to this brow because now it just needs it. See, so as we move along and as we complete one portion of the painting, we're going to need to adjust other portions, which is why I'm not just finishing the eye, I'm not just finishing the nose, I'm moving around so that everything can look like it belongs together. Now, if you put down too much of a highlight, don't forget that we have all these things on a different layer. So you can just get rid of those. You can erase them if you want. This is how it looks if we're back down to the sketch. And then with the highlights. The highlights and the lashes.
Wow.
So see what a difference that makes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Just the fine details at the end.
Right. Just this little highlight on the nose just made so much of a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to finish up those lips. Okay. So you can see this color here. It's a little more orange. And that's really nice because when you have something that's red and you're moving into the highlight or the light side of it, it's gonna move towards the orange more than the pink normally, because usually the light on the image is a white or a yellow. Now, if you have crazy lighting, if you have a blue light, then yes, maybe you'd move towards the pink or the magenta. But for this, we're gonna stick to the orange. So I'm gonna take my brush, I think I'll stick to the 13, and now I'll just start scrubbing that color in. And you can see it's a little bit darker than that pink that I originally put down. So that's good. Because that pink, we didn't want it to be a little too Barbie. Mm-hmm. And now, this color in here, in the shadow, I use that black. That's fine, but I prefer to use a really, really deep red. So I'm going to come down here to my color picker, and I'm just going to move this down to kind of a burnt brick red. And I'm going to try that and see if I can't transition this. Now already it softens that black a little and transitions it into the red that I've used. And you can see that I'm following the shape of the lip. I'm adding that texture in there, which is what we want. We always want to add the texture in these final layers. You know, if you want to blur this whole image at the end or give it a soft focus, you can do that. But right now we want to add this texture. We're going to add a little down here at the edge of the lip. We're going to add a little up here at the top. And we're just going to form that lip. It has edges, it has curves. Okay, now if I want, I can go back and take that black and give it that.
So by adding the black this way, when you remove the sketch, you're still going to see that shadow or the separation. I guess you would have to have it in there because the sketch. You're going to remove the sketch, right?
Right. We're going to remove the sketch, and really right now, I mean, we're getting close to covering up that sketch for the most part. Mm-hmm. That's our goal.
Okay, so remember that's the goal, is to cover up the sketch. You don't want that showing through. It's just a reference.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a reference. So, okay, so now I kind of have the basics down. I'm going to soften that black in some places just a little bit more. And you can see, yes, I still have that sketch here. That's all going to be taken care of in just a minute. Okay, so now I want that intense orange color. I'm going to try something like this. I'm going to move our layers out of the way. Let's try this. Now, it looks really pink. Maybe that's not the right option. Let's go with something. Is that the one I originally chose? Let's try that. Okay. There we go. That's better. Now, again, going with the shape of the lip. I'm just going to start bringing that in softly over the shapes and colors that we've already put in. All the highlights. Okay, that's starting to work. I'm going to choose a color now that will be the very high highlight on the lips. I'm not going to choose white. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to try a pink. We're going to see how that works. If it doesn't work, we'll use something with a little more orange in it. Let's go down to a 5. And I'm just going to do a light little scribble. Now I'm going to take this color also, and I'm going to meet that skin. Yeah. Now, mostly I'm covering up the sketch right now, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just doing a light edge, so it's not an abrupt transition from the dark red lips to the skin tone. So very soft into the floose here. Okay, now I'm going to pick something a little more orange. Let's try this. And I'm going to go over this pink. And we're going to adjust these transitions one more time. Make sure everything works. We're even going to adjust this over here. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to clean up this edge with our skin tone. And all I'm going to do is, let's soften this real quick. I'm going to use the color picker and I'm going to choose, let's see, something, let's choose this ochre. And now we're going to come in and we're going to adjust the edges so that that sketch is almost non-existent. And again, I'm just scribbling. Okay. This line right here, I want to soften. So I'm going to choose a kind of a, let's see, like a gold or kind of a raw sienna color. And I'm going to soften that transition and give it a little cooler, a cooler tone. Now that's almost green, which really is fine because we have that green over here on this edge.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just going to kind of bounce that color around in a few places. We don't want to limit it to one area because it'll just look out of place. Now I'm going to use the button over here on the tool and I'm going to kind of give that airbrush effect to the edge. I'm going to move this up a bit. Now this, again, this is harsh, kind of like that orange we put, or that yellow ochre we put down earlier, but I'm going to soften that. I'm going to use the color picker and choose this pink color here, and I'm going to lower the opacity, and I'm going to transition this raw sienna into the tones that we already have underneath there. Now this side of the face here isn't as developed yet as the other, but you get the general idea from this. Let's choose something like this. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to take, let's see, I want that butter yellow color that I used before, which is right there. Actually, I think it was a little more yellow. Oops. Let's try that. And I'm going to pull this highlight down a little bit more. Still keeping that pink in there for the transition. Okay, now I'm bringing this down to the chin. I think I'm going to do a little scribbling here. We still have that line where the shadow was in this portion, the highlight was up here above it. So I'm going to stick to that because it was in the original sketch. And again, I'm just lightly pressing with the pen on the tablet, giving it a little texture. Softening this highlight and moving up into the cheek. So the face is pretty close to done. I think it's time for me to do this edge with the hair. And we'll see that. Let's see. Let's choose, because the hair in this photograph is so dark, I'm going to lighten it up a little, but I need to do this dark base first. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose a dark color. Her hair is red or auburn, but I think I'll choose, this is almost kind of like a dark maroon or burgundy. I'm going to come in here, turn up the opacity, not all the way, maybe to about 70. And I'm going to begin to fill this in. And I want to be really careful. Actually, let's do this on a new layer, because we do not want to destroy what we've already done. And by the way, I hope you're saving this as you go.
That's always a good idea.
It's always a good idea, but I always forget.
I don't know how many times I've worked on something, forgot to save it, you know.
I do the
thank
same
God.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's really easy to get, you know, to zone out. And
You get so involved in it.
Yeah.
And don't even think about it.
now you can see I'm going over the face slightly, but I'm going to come back and clean that edge up. But once we have this dark color in here, it makes a huge difference with how the face looks in the end. I'm holding down the space bar, and this little hand comes up, and then
Okay,
it allows
so
me
hold
to
down
move
the
it around.
space bar to get the hand tool, and then click on the image to actually move it around the window. Okay.
Okay, now I'll come in, and I'll just do a light erase along the edges. Actually, that's too heavy an erase. Too heavy of an eraser. I'll do a lighter touch along the edges. And clean that up. And you can go back and forth with this, you know, till you get the edge that you want. And of course I went a little too far, because that's just what I normally do. Okay, but that's good for now. And then we'll just use a smaller brush, and we'll get in that those little edges. Okay, there we go. Now I think, now that I've already done it, that for the hair on this edge, that's a little light. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the levels so it darkens up a little. And I think that's closer to what I want. So now that I have that, I can just select that color, and I can fill in the rest of the image. Choose a larger brush. So now, once again, we're starting with the kind of fuzzy airbrush tool. We'll just generally fill the hair in quickly. We're on our different layers, so we don't have to worry too much about messing up the face, because we have it saved. Probably be easier if I turned this all the way up and used a larger brush. Okay. And I'm going to keep some of this texture, because I think that'll be helpful in the end result. So I'm not going to get too close to the face here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a lighter transitional color to do the hair that's right along the edge of the face. Because if you look at the image here, the hair here, it looks a little bit thinner. you know, and so there are just a few strands along the face. So I don't want to put this harsh dark color right against the lights. So same as with everything else, you know, you don't want that highest highlight at the end, and you don't want that darkest dark along your lightest light. You want your transitional colors. That's really important. So just gonna keep working here, cover this up. We still need to complete that ear, but I really want to show you how to do this hair first. I'm going to move these out of the way here for a second and finish that up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose one of the lighter colors. Let's see what we have here. Now her hair is red, so I'd like to stick to kind of these auburny. There we go. That's pretty good. It's a little bit intense. So we'll go down here to the neutrals and we'll try one of these. And I will lower the opacity because I'm doing that transition. Let's try 25 and see what we get. Okay, that's decent. It's not great. I'd like the color to be a little more red. So I'm going to use the picker and change that myself. Okay, that's a little more like what I'm looking for. And what I want to do is I just want to go along that original sketch so that that will go away. And I don't want to put it on too dark, but I am, you know, just kind of putting it on there easily, not fussing too much, not paying too much attention to neatness or the drawing. I'm just getting it on there so that there's a softer transition. And then if you want to start using the Wacom pen tool to its full effect so that you get those nice thinner marks, you can start to do that. And I just accidentally changed my color. Okay, so I want to get rid of that. Now I'll go back to my dark and I'll do the same thing. Actually, I think I'll use a slightly smaller brush. And I want to put those darks back in. Again, I'm not being too fussy because I want to lay down the underlying colors first to give it more texture. So once this is down, then I can go in and I can fuss, making every strand of hair look lovely. But I want some texture underneath it because we're not just going to have the hair that sits on top. We need to have the hair that's underneath also. So the more texture we add, the better it's going to look in the end. And once again, we need to get rid of this ear. We have the strand of hair that's going right over it. So I'm going to do a little of that now, even though I haven't painted it, just to show you how it's going to look. And remember, if you do decide to do this ear, whatever you do on this side of the ear has to continue on this side. Okay, you have to have that continuity. Okay, so now that we have the basics, we have a slight transition to the face. Now I can come in and start doing, let's take our color. I can use a smaller brush. If I want to, I can start to really get the curls to stand out more. And again, the same techniques we used on the face. We're going to use a lot of texture first, and then we can soften over those with the airbrush effect. We can come back in with the hard brush afterwards and just layer upon layer. One curl wraps into the next. And I mean, I could spend hours and hours and hours on the hair.
I can only imagine just those big long strands of hair, just
right.
making it look perfect. I'm sure you could spend another 2 hours just on that alone.
Exactly. But, you know, I just want to kind of give you a feeling for how you can achieve the effects you want and then let you run away with it. So, you know, you don't have to do it my way, but this is just kind of the basics of how I get to the final image. Okay, then what I can do is transition into the softer curls. And then I can choose a different color. Let's take this same color. Let's see. Let's give it a little more orange, which changes the value. And we'll come in and we'll put that in what will be the highlights. And again, if you want to raise this opacity and make the brush a little smaller, you can do that. If you want these, you know, little strands to come over the face a little more, you can do that too. And just try and do everything in little clumps. You don't want to have anything stand out too much on its own.
So this is where a lot of your creative juices come in right here.
Right. I mean, you could make, you know, beautiful curls and locks, or you could make a braid, or you could make her hair straight. You can do whatever you want. But if you really want to spend the time to render it, I mean, you could have a really good time doing it, but know that it's gonna take you a while.
Now, if somebody wanted to actually finish that ear, or if there's a photo where the ear's covered up, they can actually use another photo for a reference, correct?
Exactly.
Off of another person?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You can do that, and all you want to do is you want to choose these same colors and use that in this ear. So as long as you're in the same color palette, you're going to be fine. I'll just do. Okay, so I'm adding, let's see, a little more gold so I can get a finer highlight on that hair, just to show you. Okay. Now, you don't want to continue the highlight over the whole little cluster of hair that you've just done, because that'll ruin the effect. What you want to do is keep it to the highest point of the curl or the wave. And you want to use it selectively, only where the light would catch it. If you do it everywhere, it's going to flatten out. It's going to be really selective about where you put this light. And you don't, I mean, I'm using a high highlight just to show you what you can do with it, but you don't have to add this much light to her hair. She doesn't have this much in the picture, but usually if you photograph somebody in lower light, you lose the texture of the hair. So a lot of times you have to improvise and you know, kind of either make it up as you go or get more reference.
Photos of people with hair that's...
Right, or use a mirror.
Yeah.
You know, if you have...
Of course, everybody has hair, but almost everybody has. Photos of people with hair. Well, that shouldn't be... It's not too hard to find, yes.
It's not too hard to find, exactly. So basically, I mean, I would just continue doing this until everything was filled in, you know, and I would come over here and add a little close to the edge of her face to soften that. But right now, that's kind of how it looks from a distance. So you can see, if we just look at this section here, this is very soft into the face. It's starting to work. And I could come back in here and take some of these flesh tones and bring them, just like I was bringing these little strands of highlights, bring strands of flesh into these clumps of hair to make them look more like individual strands. Okay, so basically, when we zoom out, we can see that the hair looks pretty darn good. But we need to complete all of this. And I want to keep the highlights close to the face. And really, I mean, you can run with this, you know, pretty much on your own. But what I'm going to show you here is that we really have to take care of this section here. You know, we need to do the ear, we need to do the neck, and we need to do this section here. But I'm just going to get you started on this section here, and then I'm going to let you take over and do it on your own, because I think you pretty much have the principles that you need to complete the painting on your own.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to choose that nice rust color. And I'm going to go back down here to the bottom of the neck, and I'm just going to pull that in to soften the transition from the neck to the locks of hair. And you can follow the natural texture that we already have underneath this that we created with the large brush when we were just blocking that in. But it's naturally going to have some sort of pattern to it. So we can just use that. And we're just doing the same thing that we did up at the top of the head. We're just adding that texture. Some a little lighter, some a little darker. And then all we need to do is choose that highlight color again. Head on back down to the bottom and add a little bit of that in. And I especially want to add that to the tendrils that are just kind of wisping over the neck on their own, because you want them to be extra soft. You don't want the heavy dark colors next to those light skin tones. So again, I mean, I could do this for hours, but I think you kind of have the basics. Let's zoom out. To run away with it on your own. And I think what we'll do is a little touch up on this ear, and then we'll be done. And I'll let you have it to yourself.
Okay, wow.
So let's see. I'll just come up here, add a little bit here and there to pull those colors of the face right into the ear. We want to make sure we get rid of a lot of that sketch. Remember to turn the form, we need those darker colors on the edge. We can go even darker than that. Let's try this. And then let's take a dark and pull that into the ear. Really light. We're going to take the opacity down. And our brush up to our 27. Okay, now that we have that, we'll take our reds and pull them right over the ear to indicate the hair. just like in the picture. And you know, if you're a little intimidated by ears, which a lot of people are, ears and hands, this is a good way to disguise it a little bit until you get good at it. But you really want to practice at this because it's good to know how to do this. It really helps the image if you can create a nice ear. So I need to pull the darks in. Let's switch this here. So now I have my darks. I'm going to come back in with, let's see, that dark rust color, and I'm going to go right over those darks. Add a little here in the ear. I'm going to use that airbrush tool. To soften that ear a little bit, because we don't want it to pop out between that hair too much, because the light wouldn't be hitting it as much if it was under shadow from the hair. Okay, so now we have the basics of that. We'll do a few more tendrils. Soften this a little bit more. And now we can do our highlights. And then, let's see, we will be just about finished. Few of those loose tendrils in front. And let's see. That's pretty good. We could work on it a little bit more, but I think you get the idea.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, Melanie, thanks again for coming out. It looks absolutely beautiful. And thanks for your professional artistic expertise and showing us how this is all done. I'm sure there's a lot of people. I mean, I know I learned a lot watching this video than I have other videos in a long time. But thanks again. And if there's anybody out there that would like to see more artwork by Melanie Stimmel, you can visit melaniestimmel.com. And so, but there you have it. Practice makes perfect. But good luck, everyone, and hope you enjoyed the video. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.